Welcome everybody to the latest BuffZone podcast. I'm Brian Howell. Pleased to be joined by my colleague Pat Rooney. And Pat, how you doing on this lovely Thursday?
Doing well, doing well. Brian Al's got a flight to catch later today as we chat here.
Yeah, first time ever going to Houston, and well, I've been to Texas quite a bit, but it's always been like Dallas or San Antonio or last year's trip to Lubbock, and never been to the two big cities I've never been to are Houston and Austin. So I'm gonna check
I,
Houston off the list.
I've never been to Houston either, and that's on the basketball circuit this winter, so I'll knock that off the list as well, hopefully.
Technically, I've been in Houston because I had a layover there on the way
Yeah,
to Lubbock last year, but I never left the airport, so I don't count that. But
yeah,
um,
same. Same.
the Buffs don't go to Houston very often. I mean, the last time they were there actually was the 2005 Big 12 title game, which was actually probably the game that set the tailspin in motion for this program because that was the 70-3 loss to Texas, and uh, Gary Barnett's fired after that, and Colorado has not been the same ever since. So maybe this is the maybe this is the time you go back to Houston and kind of make amends for all that, but not the greatest memory the last time they were out there.
Well, hopefully not a similar jumping off point for the Buffs happening this Friday. And obviously this week, the big news and situation is the quarterback situation for the Buffs. Head coach Deion Sanders said he wouldn't. He doesn't do that. He doesn't confirm starters, even though he did 2 weeks ago ahead of the opener. All signs are kind of pointing to Ryan Staub. I wrote after the game that I think it should be stopped based on the way he played, and I touched on it again in the three extra points column. Happy to get into it more. My opinion's kind of been out there. Wondering what you're thinking, Brian Howell, and how the Buffs maybe should approach this situation after the kind of rotating quarterbacks that we saw in the win against Delaware.
Yeah, well, he says I'm not going to confirm it, but then in the same breath says, but Ryan Staub's getting the most reps.
Yeah.
Um, you know, you give the most reps to the guy that's going to start. Although Coach Prime is one that he's also talked a lot about urine it in practice, and that's where I can totally see where when the report comes out Tuesday morning, they still got Tuesday, Wednesday practice, and a Thursday walkthrough, whatever. But really Tuesday, Wednesday. If Ryan Staub didn't go out Tuesday and Wednesday and play well at practice, and Caden Salter did, why would you start Ryan Staub? So I think that's the one thing that none of us really know outside the building is what did Staub look like in practice this week? And all we can go off is the game. My opinion after the game, I was like, I would start Caden Salter because I don't think he's really done anything to lose that job. And I think that, you know, his his biggest flaw last Saturday was that Coach Prime had a predetermined rotation and somebody else came in on their turn and looked really good. Because Caden Salter on his turn got the Buffs out to a 10-0 lead, but then because of the predetermined plan, couldn't continue that. And so I'm a firm believer, we'll never know, but I'm a believer that had Caden Salter stayed in the game and played the whole thing, it would have looked just as good, if not better, than it did on Saturday. So I think that he would have won that game, pretty easily as well. So I don't think he's done anything to lose it. However, I think they're going to start Ryan Staub, and I think part of it is that Staub looked so good the other day that I think Coach Prime's going to want to ride that wave, and I can see that argument as well. That like, look, the kid came in and energized this team, 3 touchdowns and 4 drives, looked really good throwing the ball, and ride that wave. And you can easily start him, and if it doesn't go well, you go back to Caden Salter.
Exactly. And I touched on this a little bit in the post game column that a couple things to unpack with that rotation. I guess I feel, first of all, if you felt like the job was Caden Salter's and Caden Salter was the guy, regardless of how that Delaware game was going to go, I think you need to keep him in there and let him settle in. We all saw the first game. We saw those first couple drives. He wasn't bad. I wrote that as well. And to your point, he didn't really do anything to lose the job other than watch someone play much, much better. But I feel like if you play all three guys, it's because you're not totally settled on the one guy. If you had been, play him a little longer in a game that you're probably going to win anyway. Let him get a little bit more settled in, up to speed, comfortable with his teammates, all that kind of stuff. That didn't happen. Instead, he goes to the sideline, watches, as you said, another quarterback really energize the team and really play well. And I think based on that, I think you have to go with Ryan Staub. If it was just a matter of getting him work or maybe getting Juju Lewis some work in a game that you figured you were going to win regardless, I get that. That's probably commendable. You probably want to reward them a little bit. But then if you turn back to Salter, all you did was really kind of undermine his confidence a little bit, going out and watching someone else light it up, basically. So I think you go with Staub this week. I think given his experience, his time in the program, he has started in a tough environment before. I know it was a game, it didn't really matter a couple years ago at Utah. But one thing he wasn't was kind of awed by the environment. So I don't think that'll happen with Ryan Staub on Friday night. You know, it's another matter whether he comes out and plays well. And you're right, Caden Salter hasn't done much to lose the job. I think he's been a little indecisive at times, been a little tentative at times, but I think that's kind of a big picture analysis and maybe nitpicking a little bit. To your point, he did score 10 points on the 2 drives he was given. And I wrote in the extra points, it wouldn't be a bad decision to go back to Salter. I just think if that was a competition and you're wanting to go show or you want to see what all 3 guys can show, then Ryan Staub came out of that the victor.
Yeah, and I will say, when Caden Salter came back in the game, it didn't look as good, but I give him a little bit of a pass on that. You're cold and you've been sitting for,
Right.
2.5 quarters at that point. And so I look more at the first 2 drives. My hesitation in starting Ryan Staub is that, I know Delaware's FBS now. They're transitioning, but that's essentially an FCS program. I think it's different looking good coming off the bench against an FCS type program that didn't know you were going to play, as opposed to starting on the road in a conference opener against a team that has film on you. And so that's where my hesitation is. I think Salter's been in much more of those environments than Ryan Staub has. But that's where I go with ride the Staub wave, and if that wave is not there in Houston, you can switch back, and hopefully Salter is still confident to where he's ready to go. And if Staub struggles out of the gate and you go to Salters, that he can get in there and do the job. So I still think this is something we're going to be talking about probably for weeks. And I think the only way we're not talking about the quarterback job next week is if whoever starts goes out there and lights it up and gets a win and looks really good.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think the other point, Ryan Staub, is even with the increased focus on the run game, which I think the Buffs have to do.
Yeah.
The O-line looks more physical this year so far. Obviously, the running game has been horrible the last couple of years. They don't have Shedeur Sanders in that passing game to bail them out this year. But the best position group is still the wide receivers on that offense. It's still the wide receivers. And Ryan Staub was really the first, as soon as he came in the game, was the first time we really saw that group being kind of, used properly, getting the ball down the field. We've seen some of the guys getting some receptions on the quick hitters, the quick screens outside. But Ryan Staub coming in is the first time we really saw that ball being driven down the field to those receivers. And I think that's something else he brings to the table. That's still the most talented bunch on this offense. And you're right, though. If he comes out and, kind of lays an egg for a few drives on Friday night, there's no reason you can't go back to Salter.
Yeah. And I will say, when I say I don't think Salter's done anything to lose the job. If there is something, that's the one thing he's done to lose it, is that he hasn't looked like Coach Prime wants him to look. Yeah. And that's getting the ball to those receivers, and maybe some of that hesitation. But
I think that's a disconnect that we've seen in his decision making. I go back to the Georgia Tech game, and granted it was 3rd and long. I want to say it was like 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10 early in the game, and he's rolling out, and it looked like he maybe had a chance to run for it, and instead threw a long one that went incomplete. And again, maybe he gets the first down. Maybe it wasn't a matter of just getting a couple yards. He did have some room there. But I think that indecisiveness, it speaks to what you just said, is that he doesn't look like the way he's expected to look like, but at the same time, they just want him to be him. And I think there's kind of a disconnect there with trying to get the ball down the field to these receivers and asking him to be himself. Well, himself, I think, would have ran the ball in that situation. And you can kind of maybe, it's not every play. He's been effective, but you can kind of see him maybe fighting himself in some of those decision making situations.
Yeah, and maybe he doesn't feel as free as he did, in the Liberty offense that he had been in for 3, 4 years, and is just taking some time. And um, that's why I don't give up on the kid. I think it's going to be an interesting QB situation as we go throughout the year. But it starts with this Friday in Houston, and they're playing a team, Pat, that is 2-0 for the first time, I think, since 2018. But they haven't really played anybody, and so
They haven't
it's hard
played
to know
anyone.
how good Houston is. And they've not been good their first couple of years in the Big 12. But I think it's a better team than it was last year. And I don't think they're lighting it up. I don't think they're going to be a Big 12 contender, but they're a better team and they come in favored.
And they've run the ball pretty well, which I think is the uh, point. Should be, we've talked a lot about quarterbacks, and obviously that's the story. But I think the biggest aspect of this game for the Buffs to come away with a win, I think, is to make sure that they slow down that running game. They did a better job against Delaware, but still a lot of missed tackles on the perimeter, a
Mhm.
lot of big plays for Delaware. They still were just shy of 400 total yards. The bulk of that wasn't on the ground like we saw against Georgia Tech, but I think that still has to be where the Buffs come through on Friday night. They have to slow down that run game of Houston. They do that, I think they have a pretty good chance to win, regardless who's playing quarterback.
Yeah, and I think that defensive line is feeling that challenge and knowing they got to step up, and the linebackers too. I mean, uh,
Right.
Reginald Hughes led the team in tackles week 1, gets benched in week 2, and he played quite a bit, but he wasn't a starter in week 2, and so they're going to be challenged on that defense. And the Houston defense, uh, they've only given up 9 points. Again, they haven't really played anybody, but that was a top 50 defense last year nationally. So the Cougars can probably play a little defense as well. How do you see this one going? I don't see it being a super high scoring game, but what do you think?
Yeah, I'm kind of feeling the same way. I do think the Buffs come out with this win. I said before, kind of when I was looking at the season, I thought they would lose the first one, but still manage to go 3-1. Through this run of Delaware, kind of running the table the next three after Georgia had Delaware, Houston, and then next week at Wyoming. And we'll see what the team has had before you get into the meat of the Big 12 schedule. But despite the quarterback situation, I still like the Buffs in this one, regardless of who's playing. I don't see it being a high scoring game either. I think the Buffs will get a couple touchdowns, a couple field goals. Something I'm thinking along the lines of like maybe 24-14, 27-17, somewhere in there. But I think the Buffs come home with a victory. I think it'll be tough early, and the Buffs will find a way to kind of maybe pull away a little bit, get some breathing room in the second half.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be fairly low scoring. I'm pretty close to you on the score. I'm gonna go Buffs 24, Houston 20, and I think it's gonna be a good football game. And it's gonna be a lot like Georgia Tech and a lot like we're gonna see this year. That for the Buffs to win, they're gonna have to fight all 4 quarters. Last year they won a bunch of games going away, a lot of double-digit victories. I don't see that for
Yeah.
this team. Maybe 1 or 2 here and there, but I don't see a lot of those for this team. They're gonna have to fight for it, and I think they're gonna have to do that on Friday. But I think they do. I think they come home 2-1, and you'll get ready for Wyoming and have, I guess, an extra day to get ready for Wyoming.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I kind of see the same thing. But I think also really critical. The Big 12 is, so we've seen so far, pretty wide open. It looks like, TCU's been pretty impressive, I think. But, there's not a kind of that's the team to beat sort of situation in the Big
Yeah.
12. That pack is going to be kind of muddled. I think picking up a road win like this is going to be critical if the Buffs want to be play. I mean, you can only take them one game at a time. I get that, but if they want to play meaningful games in November, this is the kind of game that they have to pick up in September.
Yeah. I mean, frankly, I think if they lose this one, um, I would say it's not a bowl team.
Yeah, I'd
If it,
agree. Plenty of time to make it up and
yeah.
kind of course correct. But yeah, I kind of felt the same way. And my preseason prediction, I said 6-6, but I thought this was one that they would get. So
Yeah.
you
And
know,
and frankly, with losing Georgia Tech, if you beat Wyoming, that's 2 non-conference wins, which means you need 4 conference wins. And I think this is one of the 4 easier conference wins, and nothing against Houston, but you look at the schedule and out of the 9 conference games, I would place this as if I don't know if it's the easiest, but I'd say it's definitely one of the 4 easiest, and you gotta win this one.
Yeah, totally agree. And if they don't, we'll see how it pans out. But I think that's the phrase I keep coming back to. I think I wrote it at one point. If they want to play November games that means something, these are the kind of wins you have to get early in the season.
Yeah, for sure. Then before we get out of here, Pat, what's going on in other sports and CU right now?
Yeah, volleyball back home. They had 2 really good weekends to open play. Impressive so far. Competition hasn't been great, but they've taken care of it, rather handily. They've had a lot of kind of growing pains with this core over the last couple of years, but this is the year that they're really hoping to take a step forward. They've shown it in the first 2 weekends. Back at home this weekend, they have 3 matches in 3 days, beginning Friday against Arkansas. I'm going to go check them out on Saturday against Toledo. And then they wrap it up with a tough one on Sunday against the University of Denver. Soccer team coming off its first loss of the season. They also get the University of Denver tonight, as you and I are talking on Thursday night. Be the last non-conference game. Then back home to open Big 12 play next week with a really key one against Kansas State next Thursday. So, good starts for both teams. The soccer team be looking to bounce back from its first loss of the season, and we'll see if volleyball can continue its impressive start through the first 2 weekends.
Awesome. Well, lots of big games for all the fall sports for the Buffs this weekend. None bigger than football on Friday night at Houston. Buffs look for their first Big 12 win. And Pat, I'll see you sometime soon. Not in Houston, but I'll see you next week back in Boulder.
Safe travels to you, sir, and thanks as always, folks, for listening.